British football could be radically changed if the UK votes to leave the European Union, according to experts and leading voices in the game. Some fear so-called Brexit could lead to more than 400 players losing the right to play in the UK, while others say it may give home talent a chance. The UK will decide if it wants to stay in the European Union in a referendum on June 23rd, 2016. Leaving the EU will have a much bigger effect on football than people think, said football agent Rachel Anderson. We're talking about half the Premier League needing work permits. The short-term impact would be huge, but you could argue it will help in the long term, as it could force clubs to concentrate on homegrown talent. Some Leave campaigners, such as Brian Monteith of Leave.eu, argue that a post-Brexit UK could lower freedom of movement restrictions on the rest of the world, which would broaden the talent pool, not reduce it. Now, 332 players apparently in the top two divisions of England and Scotland top flight would be threatened by Brexit, so Brussels exit. So who is in danger? Players with an EU passport are currently free to play in the UK. Those without must meet Home Office criteria, the most important being that they are established internationals for leading nations. Analysis of squads in the first two tiers of England and the Scottish Premiership has revealed a total of 332 players would fail to meet current standards. More than 100 Premier League players would be affected, with Aston Villa, Newcastle and Watford facing losing 11 players from their squads, while Championship side Charlton Athletic would need to find 13 replacements. In fact, only 23 of the 180 non-British EU players currently playing in the Championship would get work permits, and most of those are former internationals from Ireland or Commonwealth nations with British passports. Remarkably, none of the 53 non-British EU players in the Scottish Premier League would qualify for a permit on the basis of their international career alone. That's the same situation for 63 non-British EU players in League One and 46 in League Two. The list of players potentially at risk of losing the right to play in Britain includes two of the undoubted stars of the Premier League this season. Leicester City's N'Golo Kante and West Ham's Dimitri Payet, although both played and scored for France. So it's one of them ones. West Ham Vice Chairman Karen Brady, the face of the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign, has already written to club bosses throughout the UK, warning them a vote to leave would have devastating consequences. Premier League boss Richard Scudamore made it clear in a speech to the Institute of Directors last year that his personal view was that Britain should stay in the EU, the world's largest trading bloc. However, the Premier League's public position is that EU membership is a matter for voters, and it always works with the government of the day. So basically, Premier League sitting on the fence. Privately, the league believes it is almost impossible to know what the situation regarding overseas players would be if the UK votes to leave. It's a stance shared by the Football Association. The government, for example, could bring in a quota system similar to FIFA President Sepp Blatter's 6+5 idea, or it could indeed open the possibility of doing bilateral deals with the likes of Argentina and Brazil to make it easier for their players to work here. So I'm going to come back to that. It's quite a significant line there, actually. Prior to this season, players without an EU passport were meant to have played in 75% of their national side's competitive games over the past 2 years. This only applied to nations ranked in FIFA's top 70. However, appeals were allowed for talented players from lower ranked sides, as well as players who may have missed international call-ups because of injury. The new rules brought in after hard lobbying by the FA were intended to strike a balance between a club's desire to hire the best available and the need for more openings for young British players. Now, currently the rules are a player from a top 10 nation only has to have played in 30% of their games in the 2 years prior to the date of application to be granted a work permit. A player from a nation ranked 11 to 20 must have played in 45% of international games. That percentage rises to 60 for the next 10 countries, then 75 for nations ranked 31 to 50. A vote to leave the EU would mean that players from 27 of the countries still in the union would need to meet these criteria. Now continuing on, Dr. Gregory Ioannidis, a senior law lecturer from Sheffield Hallam University, believes the rules could be relaxed should the UK leave the EU. If that happened, then he said he did not envisage any problems for clubs. However, he added it may be difficult for such an agreement to be put into place because footballers are considered workers in law, and it may be the case that they cannot be treated as a special category. Many experts think the work permit rules will be watered down. For example, non-EU countries like Norway and Switzerland have both made concessions to gain access to to the single market. I would be surprised if those work permit rules were not recalibrated, said Professor Raymond Boyle from the University of Glasgow. The sports industry expert added countries such as Switzerland simply make their own rules. My sense is that elite commercial sport will always have the clout to influence rules so that they benefit. Now keep that in mind. That's a huge point. What everybody agrees on, though, is that British football would be in for a period of flux as new rules were decided and clubs rebalanced their squads. This could be a positive thing for homegrown players in the longer term, said leading agent Simon Bailiff. The downside could be the value of the Premier League decreasing as its attraction to the collection of foreign stars across its attraction is the collection of foreign stars across many clubs. I don't personally believe it will have a huge impact on the biggest names, but it could have an effect on the general traffic of non-star international players, which may hurt the league's quality and attractiveness for foreign investors. But this all depends on how we Brexit, and that is impossible to predict. Gman Gezzie Fizzle, want to hear your views on this first, then we're going to throw this out to the Skypers as well. But Gman Gezzie, one of you want to have out on this?
I'll just say this, right? I don't really want to talk about the Brexit in relation to football, because I think it's just too much of a microcosm.
Well, we kind of have to, just on potential.
No, I know, but I just think that the Brexit harms a lot of things in the wider scale, right? Especially in England. So I would say to you, let's look at a lot of the lower level and intermediate level jobs, right? Where most nationalists would say, oh, but this is where the foreigners are coming and taking our jobs, and there's no jobs for, British people and blah, 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 etc., etc. Now, to that I say poppycock. Just because, right, I says to you, those jobs were always there, and the reason why they were available for someone else to come in from somewhere else to go and take the job was because the people who were there didn't want to take it, right? So if we were to start then taking a lot of these people out, and those workers weren't available at certain rates, etc., etc., a lot of businesses fall down, right? And then, of course, with the application to football, it means it's a lot harder to go and get certain talents into certain leagues and playing on a regular basis, which means, the allure of moving in terms of transfers isn't there anymore, to the point where I'd actually say, if you go as far as to go into a Brexit, I would say, well, what would be the point in coming to England? There's no actual real allure to go there anymore, which means that, leagues like League 1, what's your Rick Ross? League 1, right? La Liga, the Bundesliga, Serie A, and even the Eredivisie, they're much more appealing than going to England. So, in terms of the marketability of the Premier League and the Championship and everything else, and having a wider global audience have an eye and an ear on it, that's taken away with a Brexit, in my opinion.
G-Man, do you want to jump in as well?
Well, to be honest, like Gezzie said, it's a bit of a mindful in relation to current game and the amount of foreign imports that we do have in our game. I guess it's going to be crippling for some clubs, as you've mentioned. But it's one of those things. How will they actually? I'm just thinking, how will they actually apply these rules? Because it's not going to be a Gestapo thing where overnight, they're just going to start dragging people out of their houses and throwing them out on the road and saying, look, you haven't got a job no more in this football club because you're not allowed to play. I'm pretty sure it's for me it's like scaremongering, and I don't, if you understand where I'm coming from, because there's too much money for one in the game of football, and these clubs produce a lot of money, as well as spending a lot of money. They produce a lot of money in their industry So I can't see it, if you get what I mean. Just looking at the figures and everything, I just can't see it, how they will implement, essentially just say we do exit Euro, essentially overnight, next minute, sorry, whatever club, you've got 5 players over the threshold, you need to get rid of them right now. It's not feasible. That's where I am. I just can't see it. I just look at it as scaremongering. I just don't read too much into it.
No, that is fair dues. It's one of them ones. In terms of Brexit, I've on a general basis, I've kind of skimmed over it, and it looks like it's just more advantageous to stay with the European Union, especially when it comes to trade. Because opening this out to more than football, as Gezzie did earlier, it's a case of this country relies heavily on international trade, and especially because we don't really create anything, we don't really make anything anymore. We haven't got industries over here anymore because they've either been completely destroyed or sold off. So we have to rely on trade. So you want to keep your avenues of trade as plentiful and as broad as possible. Now, from what I just read out a second ago, it was a case of, yeah, the short-term impact will be huge, but you could argue it will help in the long term, as it could force clubs to concentrate on homegrown talent. But we've been saying on our shows for the past 5 years plus that clubs should be focusing on homegrown talent anyway. It shouldn't take leaving the EU to change that focus and for clubs to be rebalancing themselves. It really shouldn't. It really actually shouldn't take that. But for me, the fact of the matter is, it's a case of, it's just an interesting one where, like, just seeing that certain clubs will be affected heavily. Especially with Charlton needing to find 13 replacements for players. Watford will basically lose a whole team as well. Watford, Aston Villa and Newcastle will basically lose a whole team of players, 11 players. And it's nuts. It's a case of, 23 of the 180 non-British EU players playing in the Championship would get only 23 would get work permits. And it's just kind of scary to believe, because certain clubs will be decimated by this, where there's certain clubs who can't afford to pay big money for British players. So in theory, it might even drive the price of British players even further up. So, for me, it's a case of a 6+5 idea. Yeah, it would be interesting in theory, but at the end of the day, we've seen that with the homegrown rule, there's loopholes. And that brings me actually onto my next point, is the fact that it was mentioned that certain, many experts think the work permit rules will be watered down. For example, non-EU countries like Norway and Switzerland have both made concessions to gain access to the single market. So even though Norway and Switzerland are not part of the EU, they've still relaxed their rules and tweaked their rules enough to still allow trade between them and the EU. So essentially, it's one of them was they've just bent the rules anyway. And where was it? Professor Raymond Boyle from the University of Glasgow said something quite interesting, where he said countries such as Switzerland simply make their own rules. My sense is that elite commercial sport will always have the clout to influence rules so that they benefit. And football is definitely an elite commercial sport. So the game, even though it is a microcosm, it's hugely influential financially. So football will always have that power to mod the rules. Doesn't mean that I'm encouraging us to leave the European Union, not by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of positives. But the fact is, British football would be in a period of flux as new rules were decided and clubs rebalanced their clubs. But it's one of them ones, in terms of a positive thing for homegrown players, leaving the EU is one of them ones where it's like, no, you shouldn't have to do that to to create a more equitable playing field for homegrown players. It shouldn't take something that drastic that will not only affect football but will affect a country. It shouldn't take something that drastic, because the FA, the Premier League, I mean, the fact is they've dragged their heels and come up with half-baked ideas anyway. That needs to be focused on, as we've mentioned on many shows. But it is one of them ones. I mean, it not having an impact on the biggest names. Yeah, of course, the biggest names are going to move wherever they want, but there will be some people who need an opportunity but won't ever get it if we were to leave the EU. So it's interesting that Brexit on a general basis just divides opinion. This divides opinion anyway, and no one's really sure which way it's gonna go. Which way will it go? But the fact of the matter is, the fact that even if Britain was to leave the European Union, you would have to tweak and water down so many rules just to survive, to kind of survive, really. Not just in a footballing sense, but on a general basis. That is it really worth the hassle of leaving? Is it really worth it? Because for me, in a free market economy, you should be able to move where you please, when you please. That's the whole definition of free market economy, not limited market economy. This not like the argument between free will and predeterminism. It's one of them ones. It's like, or limited will. But for me, it's a case of, for me, it is one of them ones where it's just like I said, it's impossible to, as has been said already, it's impossible to predict where things are going to go in terms of Brexit. But the fact of the matter is, as I said, to make it a good thing for homegrown players, it shouldn't take something that's potentially going to completely destabilize the game for a number of years. It should be something that's already in motion, that's working within the current system, that can be built and worked upon. Because at the end of the day, it could be one of them ones where you could vote to leave the European Union in one referendum, change all your rules, move the goalposts, and then a few years later think, oh crap, the grass really isn't greener on the other side. We need to be back in. And then when you go back in, you need to change all those rules back, and then you destabilize the game again. That would be one angle that I would come from on that. So, I mean, it's one of them ones. I mean, there is one other thing as well where leading agent Simon Bailiff saying the downside could be the value of the Premier League decreasing as its attraction to the collection of foreign stars, as its attraction is the collection of foreign stars across many clubs. That is huge, because the Premier League is making billions at the moment. Not really spreading it around to the other leagues, but leaving that aside, we've discussed that before. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, hurting the league's quality and attractiveness to foreign investors is not good, because there's a lot of foreign investment. Leicester City, Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal. There's a lot of I've just named 5-6 clubs off the top of my head who have foreign investment in their club. So you could see values of clubs going down from, say, 400 million to 120, just because of trade restrictions that can make stuff a hell of a lot harder. And then if you're competing in, say, the European Champions League now, or the Europa League, you're competing against teams who are still in the union, who still have the free market, and they're taking advantage of the free market, and you're gonna get left behind even further. And we've already discussed before about the coefficient rankings and England itself being left behind in regards to that. Opening that out to Britain, you could get England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, you could get them left behind as well. So I just think it's an interesting one. I mean, Gezzie, G-Man, have you got anything more to say about that? Or?
No,
Sorry, go on, G-Man.
no, I was going to say, just listening to that, to be honest, the reason I can't see it, yeah, you talk about the free market, you talk about, the negatives of leaving the European Union, yeah, but then the positives of leaving the European Union is that, there's going to be more control over what Britain and British companies and British industries can do for themselves, the deals that they can strike. You talk about where they're going to, for instance, hypothetically lose out with certain deals in Brussels, potentially France, Holland, wherever, yeah. But, essentially, in this game where the British Premier League, like what you said earlier, Premier League is seen as one of the biggest and best leagues. The new TV money deal that's coming into the league from next season, and the way clubs think in general about the movement of players that they're investing in, the investment of talent, homegrown talent, yeah. I can't see an overnight shift. I can't even see, a 10-year plan shift for that to change to, enhance the grassroots sort of game, or young talent. There's always going to be a need to. And there always has been, we've seen it, we know this, yeah? There's always has been a need to get foreigners in for cheap, and that's how, that's the fundamentals of how this country is made up of, is the, cheap foreign labour, or cheap labour in general, working at the grassroots of all industries, making the whole, the most fundamental parts of this country working. And it's the same with football, because I'm pretty sure it will affect those that work in the stadiums as well as those who work in admin areas of football grounds. It's going to affect. There's just too much effect on too many clubs, I reckon, and I think it's a lot of scaremongering. I don't think it. I don't think it will be as much of a big issue. I don't think Watford will lose. All of a sudden turn around, like I said, tomorrow, if it was to happen, and then, a year later they're going to lose out on all their players and, struggle. I don't think it's going to happen like, it will happen like that. I don't think it can happen like that.
I mean, Gezzie Fizzle, you wanted to jump in as well, didn't you? Gezzie, did you want to join in?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to piggyback and say, I think that G-Man raises a fair few valid points, and in terms of the application of all of the implications, there's, put it this way, financially speaking, and this is what football is now, especially at the top levels, unfortunately, is business. Right, it's not necessarily about the sport. It's about business, and it's about all of the business connections. It's about finance. It's about generating money, right? And if this supposed Brexit was to go through, as you rightly pointed out, LJ, there's a lot of money that's going to be left on the table, right? Because as I say, in terms of it being as attractive an outfit, it's not anymore. It's not. And what's really interesting about this Brexit, it would make more sense to me if the UK were known to produce pretty much anything. And generally speaking, in terms of production, the UK doesn't produce that much. They're not a production company, right? Or country, for that matter, right? Let's look at most products, okay? Most products are made where? This is a pop quiz to everybody that's listening now. Where are most products made?
Well, it's China. China, Taiwan.
Well, this is the thing. This is it, right? So unless you're in those two places, you're not going to go and get anything.
So here's the thing: they don't have anything. The UK as a country, to say it was an entity, don't have anything to sell. Especially England, don't have anything to sell. They buy everything, and you want to shut yourself off from one of the main places where you go and buy stuff. Why would you want to do that? Doesn't make any sense.
No, exactly.
Right? And then, of course, you get affordable labour from being a part of the EU, but you want to stop that. Doesn't make any sense. So, I don't know. I just think all of the relevant business people at the top level that handle millions and billions and in some cases trillions will say there's really no sense in a Brexit. I can understand the logic behind it, and there are some parts of the Brexit that I actually support myself. But overall, I have to say the benefits, especially for business, especially for people, remain in staying in the EU. And football, specifically the Premier League and the Championship, right? If you want to continue to go and make money, the way that you do it, the way that most of the big clubs have been doing it for the past, 20 odd years of the Premier League era, is you go, you find, wait for it, little known stars across Europe, okay? It turns out that they are actually very, very good. They help you win trophies, and then when the time is right, you sell them on, you make money. That's how it works.
Oh, definitely.
So, unless let's look at Arsenal. What were Arsenal, especially during their glory days, built off of? All right, players that were signed for nominal fees from the continent and then sold on for bigger fees after they've gone and won some things.
Although the difference with them is that they were
it.
French internationals. That's where the loophole would be.
Some of them were, right? But even in the case of Cesc Fabregas, he's a youngster, and they made how many million from him?
Oh God, quite a bit, quite a fair bit.
Right. So I'm saying you jump out of the EU with this Brexit, and as I say, it's much more politically business and financially motivated than what the example I'm giving. But if that was to be the case, and that's where we are, there isn't a repeat of the Cesc Fabregas story, who, wait for it, ended up in England. Right? So, in the case of a Brexit, there's really no point in anyone coming to England at any point. None. And as I say, in terms of the business deals that would have been made for the clubs and the league, in terms of generating finance, all of that, in my opinion, if there is a Brexit, goes away. Right?
Well, it might have been a lot harder for Man United to strike a deal with, say, Chevrolet, or for Liverpool to strike a deal with New Balance, for instance. Just saying.
So, no, but the other thing I says to you is the way that I would handle this personally, and it does sound a bit tit for tat, but this is just how it is. If you decided to leave the group, when we in the group are making money, please do not come back to ask us if you can be allowed in, because you were in it before, right? Yeah. Before the money was being made. You decided to leave. Therefore, you do not, I repeat, do not get welcomed back in again. If you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. It's really that simple.
Well, it's like people who cashed out early on Leicester City, who could have won more money. It's like, well, if you cashed out, you've got your winnings. You could have had a lot more, but you decided not to stay at the party. So it's one of them ones. So I
just want to say two things, yeah.
Go on, G-Man.
You just mentioned something that, from a football perspective, though, this is another way I see it. Yeah, we talk about the movement of players, like foreign players. Yeah, you mentioned the caveat with Arsenal was getting French players, just like we have a French, German, we have French, German, and you can say Spanish sort of links. Yeah. Yeah. Now, if there was a Brexit, yeah, I'm just assuming that football clubs will then find, like you said earlier, the country, football clubs, businesses, they'll find a way of striking a deal with countries that might not be part of the European Union, yeah?
Yeah,
So
of course,
they've
they'd
got
bend the
their
rules because they'd have
Essentially,
to.
that's what happened, yeah? And then, for me, the most logical thing is they'll start, obviously they might have an immigration policy between themselves and those countries, and then start farming players through those routes to get them into England.
But that's not always. But that's not always a good thing, because remember, it was. I think it was something we discussed briefly.
Thing, but I'm just saying. No, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying this is the way. I'm assuming clubs will, not clubs, the industry of football will start thinking, because it's essentially the same thing with France when they get in. You hear about the French ghetto camps of the young Algerians and Northern African, and East African football players that they're farming, and how France reacted when those players then decided they wanted to play for the actual national team.
That's you beat me. That's exactly where I was going to go with it. That's why I said it's not necessarily a good thing, because there's been a lot of tension in France, especially since that mutiny, even before that mutiny in the World Cup in 2010, where it was like, you look at half of that winning team. You look at half of that French World Cup winning team, it was a case of there was Algerians, Moroccans, Senegalese, among others, who were represented in that squad. So it's kind of like you could end up in another situation like that in Britain, and it'll almost certainly Britain would actually be forced to go that way, because if you're closing off avenues in Europe, you've got to go looking elsewhere, and you've got to bend your rules accordingly. So it then becomes interesting from there. In my view, it becomes very interesting from there. So, it is one of them ones.
But the way is, you got to think about it. Britain's always been like that, though. Because if we take it outside of football, and we just look at the migration of our heritage and our families, that's how technically, Jamaicans, Africans, and
the whole SS Windrush
came over here.
Yeah, the SS Windrush, people invited over by the British Empire. Yeah, that's how my family got over it. It's like, so.
I don't see all doom and gloom with a Brit exit for football. I think they'll find their way around it, essentially, to get what they want and what's required.
It's not. No, it's
the game. It's definitely moving at the pace.
I mean, it's definitely not all doom and gloom, but the amount of chicanery you would have to pull off to make it work, it's just a case of, is it worth it? That's where I'm coming from on it. Is it really worth it? And, I mean, speaking of... I
paint a negative picture. I realise that, right? But at the same time, as you said, there are going to be workarounds somewhere. That's just how the system's built. But one of the factors that we aren't actually speaking about here, right, is China. Right? So they've already gone and taken a lot of the top stars from Europe anyway. So if you don't take away of, say, a Premier League with Brexit and all of the loopholes, right, if players want to go make money, which, let's be honest, they do, that's one of the main points of having a career like that, why not go and play in China? And I'll tell you, if a lot of them are going now to get the money anyway, a lot more will go when, the option of the Premier League is limited because of Brexit. So I think China is something else to consider. Right? And I don't want to do this whole East versus West thing, because it's really not about that. I'm saying that if you minimize one of the top options, in the West, then the East and the Far East looks a lot more attractive, especially if you want to get paid.
Yeah. And especially as China's trying to become the next world football superpower, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago. It's very interesting. But I mean, speaking of speaking of very interesting, Jamie Bailey, you've been waiting to jump in with your opinion on this as well. What's your view on the potential impact of Brexit, if it happens, on British football?
I'm not a big advocate of politics in football anyway, so...
Nor are we. Trust me, nor are we. David Cameron, that guy needs to stay as far away from football as possible. Oh, Gary Lineker should do this. You should shut up and run the country properly. That's my view on David Cameron. Not the view of Pitch Talk or any of the PT family, but Straight Shootin LJA's personal opinion. Anyway,
right.
Sorry.
Fair enough. I can see the point of Gman Gezzie Fizzle and yourself, and very valid points as well, of why to stay in. But you made one massive point. I wouldn't say we. England do not produce their own stuff. So if that's the case, that the country heavily relies on other things, pretty much tells me that England needs to kind of cut the middleman and say, you know what, for the next 10 years, we need to go back to the roots of what this country was built on. And if there wasn't, and yes, it was built on a few wars and stuff like that, but you know what, right now the wars are not really going to be happening because they're in a position just to go, okay, well, we're going to have to drop down the taxes, we're going to have to drop down a few other things, and jobs are probably going to be lost, and there's going to be a lot of companies out of business. But you know what? We need to go back to the basics of how this country was built. The simple fact is, there's still mining companies have gone out of business because nobody really wants steel anymore. What they want is a computer in front of their faces. People want to see numbers and statistics, and that's more of a European thing than it is an English thing. If I go back to football, the last time that football was basically not built on money was the fact that one, Leicester won the league this season, and two, Roy Hodgson wasn't being controlled by the FA. Now, if I look at it, there's certain players in what was proposed as the Euro 2016 squad that was brought out on the chat, that certain players shouldn't be in there, and the only reason why they are is because the FA needs a few shirt sales whilst they're trying to get rid of the debt on Wembley. Yeah, it's a good thing that it was all made in China, but what happens to England? What happens to these countries? What happens to the country where everything was about the English way? Like, okay, yes, you couldn't play backwards football anymore, which is, okay, let me just play route one and see if Joe Hart can hit it up to Harry Kane and put it in the back of the net. That can be cut out. That's fine. But if we're talking in a general population, I think if England are going to take this exit, they're going to have to have an exit strategy where over the next 20 to 30 years, everything that they're going to be putting into England itself, or whether it's Britain, or whether it's just a few of the countries, two of the four countries, then they're going to say, okay, well, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to do it. I look at this. I think it's more of a long. It's too much of a short-term plan for some of these owners, and I look at. You look at the situation with Leeds. The guys, I'm not even trying to be racist. The guy's Italian. So, what's an Italian guy doing? Italian mobster, basically, running the country, running the club into the ground. Well,
I'd say fraudster. I'd say fraudster personally, because it is fact that he's been convicted of fraud. So.
Yeah. The same thing with what happened with Pompey, the same thing with what's going to happen with Aston Villa. The American owner's problem is not there, so we hired a whole bunch of English guys just to run the club for him. Oh, but now they want to leave because the club's not going to be in the top division anymore.
Yeah, kind of like a proxy sale, kind of like a proxy sale in a supermarket, where it's like, yeah, okay, I don't want to be seen to be buying this because I'm technically not allowed to. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get someone else to buy it for me. So
That's the same thing.
of course it's the same thing. No, I'm agreeing with your point, to be honest.
That's what I hate. And this is the thing. This is what I hate. The same thing happened at Fulham. They went through 3 different matches before they got relegated. Then all of a sudden they had to go for another 3 before they steadied the ship.
Yeah.
And I still don't believe in Jokanovic.
Yeah.
That's the joke about it. I still don't. I'm glad that Watford lost got rid of Jokanovic.
But in regards, coming back to Brexit, just to kind of put a finer point on it. Do you think it just to kind of bottom line it?
Yeah, the bottom line is simple. If you have a plan like the Germans just to get out of the EU, then it should work. If you don't, then look, you know what, stay in. And that's basically what it's done. It's basically built on, as Gezzie Fizzle said, it's based on the big businesses saying we need your foreign imports to kind of keep our ship sailing in this country. Okay, well, we don't need you, so therefore you can probably ship yourself somewhere else. And if I look at it, some other countries will probably thrive with England out of the EU. I look at it as saying there's a lot of people coming from Eastern Europe, from Scandinavia, from Africa, from all of these different countries, and saying, yep, we're just going to put you in, and as far as we're concerned, you've got the job as much as you want it. Yes, you've worked hard just to do it in your country, but you haven't. And the worst thing is, some of the people that have taken the jobs haven't got the levels that we. Apparently, the levels in both countries are not the same. Yes, they've got the qualifications, but apparently the levels are not the same. So
yeah,
how do you weigh that up? That's a big issue. Yes, the rules are going to be having to change as well. But I think if you're looking, in my opinion, if you're going to look at it and say, it's like, I'll go back to the football point. A level 2 in Northern Ireland is not the equivalent to a level 2 in England. It's still a level 1. So you'd have to come all the way here just to do the level 2 again. It's like, how does that even work?
Well, apparently it's the same with driving tests. If you pass your driving test, I think in America or Canada, and you come over to the UK, you've got a year to pass your driving test here.
Yeah. But
the thing is, with Brexit, you'd kind of have to relax those rules even more, especially if you're dealing with countries who can't even speak English, for instance.
That's the thing. The countries that you can go to France, you can go to all the other countries. You can go across the border. The rules will be different, and I keep saying we. I say England. Everybody has to go over there and take on the rules that are there. You go to Abu Dhabi, where they want to put out a new 39th match over in Doha. It's like, okay, but you go out there and you have a match. You're gonna have to go through their rules as much as you can. Got no choice in the matter.
Yeah.
But then you come over here, it's just like, you know what? As if you got money, yeah, cool. Stand in. It's cool. You won't stick out like a sore thumb. Oh, you need help? That's cool. That's fine.
Yeah.
And that's my issue. It's not. This is where I keep coming back to the whole European, not the European Union. Keeps coming back to the whole working around getting the youngsters in. And I think if England go back to that, you know what, the Brexit won't be a big issue. It will just be the case of some managers won't like it, so they'll move on. So we'll get some new managers in who are probably going to be level at pro license and will probably do the job that Wenger, that Guardiola, that Conte will do. They will do it to that level, and if they have to do it over a sustained period of time, then the Germans will have to look at it and say, as much as we haven't got our money in the way that we want it right now, you know what? 10 years from now, I think we're going to be European champions. If we're going to really be helping England out at Premier League level, we're going to be the World Cup champions. That's what I'm seeing it as.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it as if you've got an outside. I'll go back and just finish off as a prime suggestion. Have a simple plan for everything that we do. For everything that happens in England, have a simple plan. If you cannot make a simple plan, you don't deserve to be in business. If you can't make a second plan out of that primary plan, then you don't deserve to be in business. If you are running this country and you're saying, yeah, I can't do this, I can't do that, then yeah, move on. We don't need you.
No, fair.
That's the way that I'm seeing it. I think if Charlton and Watford are going to be losing that many players, then go and produce the ones that you need. That's just the whole point of it. If they're not born here, then that's fine. That's cool. If they can become an EU, a British citizen, great. If they can't, that's tough luck. Go and produce what you need in that position to fill the void.
There's plan
Simple.
B. Always having a plan B.